I got a question about multiverses, so now I am going to answer by sitting here to record a dumb little Kirblog. Anybody who gets that one, you get lots of points in my book. This question comes from Deltaheatran. What are your thoughts on cameo characters that are used on multiple projects like Subasa? He is referring to a little show by the creators of Card Captors and other such things, or I should say Card Captor Sakura Clamp, a show called Tsubasa Chronicles, which I will talk about because I thought this would be a good week to talk about this particular subject of my thoughts on multiverses because, as it just so happens, earlier this week I borrowed a bunch of the Archie Mega Man comics from my new recent friend, Mr. Andrew Dickman, who's a fantastic animation artist who I've followed the work of for many years. And I went to his house, and he had a whole shit ton of Mega Man comics collected, and I wanted to catch up, so I borrowed a bunch from him. And then I recently got to read, at the end of that, because they're in the middle of producing it right now, the Worlds Unite, that was a car you just heard, the Worlds Unite crossover special, which is featured characters from Mega Man, Sonic the Hedgehog, Mega Man X, Sonic Boom, and a shit ton of Sega and Capcom franchises all coming together, and it's quite amazing. I've been following it and really excited about it in particular because two artists who I'm also friendly with and who greatly admire the work of Ryan Jampol and Tyson Hess have also gotten the chance to do some artwork for it, and it looks pretty goddamn impressive. Oh, and also my other friend Edwin Huang got to do one of the covers for it, and it looks awesome. It was quite an undertaking, like really kind of a historic thing because it had all these different characters with all these incredibly different art styles all together in one thing, and they had to keep it consistent, and all this research that had to go into the writing to keeping everybody consistent in personality to the way that you know them from the appropriate games they came from. It was really impressive, and it reminded me of this question and how much I've grown to really appreciate and I guess dream about doing something as amazing as a multiverse story. I think also about older stuff from my childhood that was there's just something so basically exciting about two different franchises coming together that just always make for like intriguing stories, especially depending on how exactly they make them work. Sometimes they have a lot of logic put to them, and sometimes they don't necessarily. But there's stuff like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was one of the still to this day one of the most ultimate crossovers of animation. Just the solid fact of having Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Daffy Duck in the same area together is pretty incredible, and the setting for it that the team that made it, who are legendary filmmakers and animators, like Richard Williams, for instance, is really quite a feat, especially for something from that long ago. And I'm sure, there was probably some inspiration at the time taken from just the idea of having, comic book crossovers, which were, I'm sure back then were pretty common with like DC and Marvel and everything. But that aside, yeah, it's something that I've always dreamed about doing with my own characters. And a lot of people have always asked me, like, especially with Tome recently, oh, you should do like a TV Tome Adventures and Tome crossover. And I'm just like, there is no sensible way that would work, and I wouldn't want to just do it willy-nilly just for the sake of having a crossover. I would rather have something else that is more interesting and logical, and it just based in some kind of logic than that. I mean, obviously there was, there's also stuff like, the cartoon heroes, cartoon all-stars come to the rescue, which, wasn't based on any kind of logic, but it was just a wonderful little thing that was meant for a good cause, beyond just entertainment. And that I thought was really cool. I remember actually, I guess it's not bad for me to say this because it's not happening, but I remember years ago, there were a bunch of artists on Newgrounds that were, I think it was meant to be like an official thing under Newgrounds, like the company, is they were going to produce a special kind of like Cartoon All-Stars Come to the Rescue of all the most famous Newgrounds characters that were all going to come together. And I think they were going to teach Pico, who is the little red-haired, green-shirted mascot character of Newgrounds, or one of the mascots anyway that Tom Fulp created, I believe. They were going to teach him how to not be a douchebag on the internet. I think that was what the goal was. I remember being told about this like years and years and years and years ago, and it just never ended up happening, which is kind of a shame because I don't think I ever would have been like actually part of that because I was still kind of nobody at the time. But just hearing about that concept was really exciting. Now, Tsubasa Chronicles, on the other hand, that was a really intriguing case too, because I didn't grow up really like as that big of a Clamp fan. I had seen, the edited version of what was called Cardcaptor Sakura. We just got it as Card Captors over here. But other than that, I wasn't that familiar with a lot of the other Clamp series. I think I'd seen, like stuff of Chobits and stuff like that, like kind of around, but I wasn't really familiar with it. But there was something about Tsubasa Chronicles, and it very well could have been just having Shoran and Sakura in it that got me intrigued in the first place. But those of you who haven't seen Tsubasa Chronicles before, so it is basically Clamp's ultimate get-together crossover special set in its own unique universe, where so it has the characters from all these different series and everything together, but it's a new setting, and it has nothing. It's not connected, as far as I know, to any of the pre-existing. Although maybe it is eventually. I'm not really sure. I'm sure there's probably somebody who got farther into it than I did who knows that. But more or less, it's all these different characters from all these different comics that they did for years and years and years in an alternate kind of fantasy universe. But the point is that it follows this new version of Shoran and Sakura and these two new characters that they made specifically for the show, as far as I know, Phi Flowride and Kurogane. And they travel around all these different universes looking for I won't get into full spoilers, but they're looking for particular items that connect to a bigger plot and blah, blah, blah. Basically, the setting is that they go to different worlds in each storyline, and it's really cool. And I followed the anime adaptation, which only got, X amount into the story for a long time. I remember I was following that, and I think I actually still have that collected on DVD somewhere back home, but I never got to watch the movies. There were a couple movies that came afterward that were also continuations of the story where the anime had stopped because the manga had continued onward and onward. And I learned some more things about some of the stuff that had happened later. But the thing that really drew me into that was it was such a great concept, because it reminded me of this is like if the concept of Kingdom Hearts were a lot better executed. Because even though Kingdom Hearts is infinitely more popular and successful, mostly because of the actual content they're using, which is, the Disney characters and the Final Fantasy characters and everything, just the brand recognition alone, and it being a video game too, because video games seem to do a lot better than comics do these days. But either way, the concept of Kingdom Hearts is still cool. I am still a fan of Kingdom Hearts, and I'm going to do a Kirblog about that one someday, because I know everybody wants me to do that, but I've been getting a lot of questions for that one. But anyway, Kingdom Hearts, I feel like it didn't always live up to its greatest potential, especially not in the beginning. I think that some of the later games learned to do this better, where it was making actual use of the individual worlds for the development of the characters. To me, with Kingdom Hearts, and I'll probably talk more about this in depth if I ever do a Kingdom Hearts Kirblog down the line at some point, which I'm sure I will, is I always felt it was aggravating that they would Sora and Donald and Goofy would just go to the different Disney worlds. They'd have a little adventure, invade upon the Disney movie plot happening at the time, and then they would just go about their business, and it wouldn't really affect the overall plot, because they would just the plot stuff was connected mainly to the characters that were not related to the Disney worlds. And now what they've been doing lately, from the stories that I've been following, like in Birth by Sleep and some other ones, the characters actually do take away a real experience, and they learn something from each individual Disney world, and that I like better. I'm kind of hoping that Kingdom Hearts 3 will be more like that, but who can say? But either way, it felt much more worth investing into the different dimensions and worlds and things that the characters in Tsubasa Chronicles would go to. Because it felt like it was all connected. And also I think that they did weave much more of the actual plot points, like the overall story of what they were going through, into each of the worlds, because a lot of key characters would follow them into it, or some of them would be recurring and they'd have different purposes and etc. And that was cool. I really liked that show. I kind of wish that I followed more through with it, but I remember Mariana Miller, who's a good friend of mine, a really talented actress, she was a huge fan of that show. She actually has the Phi Flowride tattoo that I actually vectorized for her to use for getting tattooed on. I think it's on her leg somewhere. I don't know. But either way, she was a big fan of that show. She was telling me some things about what happens with it later on, and I was just kind of like, oh, that sounds cool, I guess. But she was like, no, it gets kind of stupid later on. I was like, oh, so maybe that might have deterred me. But I mean, she was bigger into it, so I would trust her opinion on like whether it was good or bad, as it continued onward. But I digress. Yeah, Subasa Chronicles was really cool, and I got a good experience out of what I saw of that. So, as generic and kind of predictable as this answer is too, I think Smash Brothers, one of probably the main reason. Okay, there's two main reasons why I love that game. Is one, because I can play that with anybody. I can always play that with any friend group at any point in time, all the time, and it's still a lot of fun. Like it's I think that's probably my favorite game to play. More so than something like Mario RPG, just because I can share that experience with other people. But the other big reason is because it is a giant celebration of all these different characters and series that I love. And even though I understand why Sakurai and all the people at Team Sora decided not to do something akin to the Subspace Emissary storyline, I'm really happy that we got the Subspace Emissary in general, because sometimes I'll just go back and I'll just watch it because it's an awesome, cool story to experience, and I love it because of having all those characters in there. And they were smart because they used them in also sort of an alternate world that wasn't necessarily connected to any of the the individual games that they came from. They just had their personalities kind of all left over and intact from what you know them as and everything. And that was cool. That made for like a much more freeing kind of world. So that was cool. And on that same kind of note, I'm remembering this too, Cross Epic, which was this awesome Dragon Ball One Piece crossover that Akira Toriyama and Eiichiro Oda did themselves. I believe they both illustrated it together. Was amazing. And in the same kind of vein as Smash Brothers and Tsubasa Chronicles and a lot of that stuff, I think it worked infinitely better because it was a different continuity that wasn't connected to anything. I think that it is exciting when you have it like legit connect with each other. I understand from the perspective of like, oh, it's cool because it feels like there's much more at stake if like you've followed the canon series of both things that are crossing together. Like it feels a little bit more weighty. I mean, if anything, that's exactly the reason why I think all the Avengers and Marvel's movies are really flourishing and doing well, because they're all connected together and they do have all these crossovers, and we're seeing it all play out together in one giant long form story experience, which is great. So there's definitely value to both, but I think from the stuff that I've experienced in this kind of vein, I think what I love the most is when it's all the characters, but they're in a new type of setting that isn't necessarily connected to anything. Because Cross Epic was like this kind of goofy fantasy world where they could just use the Dragon Ball and One Piece characters in any way that they wanted, and they just had a cute little fun side story. And I think they also did one that was animated, that was One Piece, Dragon Ball, and Toriko. I haven't seen that. I've heard it's not amazing, to be honest, because I don't know, Toriko's kind of like whatever, but either way. But yeah, I that kind of stuff I really enjoy. As far as doing it myself, I don't know. Like I've definitely, there's been a few times over the course of time that I've thought about like, oh, how would I do that, or what would I even do? There was one concept that I've tried coming up with that was like for a game. Because I remember a lot of my friends on Skype, like, and more so back in the day, not so much lately, but we always talked about, oh, wouldn't it be cool if like there was I think often we'd say Smash Brothers, like of web stuff, like internet cartoons and web comics and things like that, all putting all that kind of stuff together. Not necessarily has to be Smash Brothers. I think I was thinking about like some kind of time hopping or dimension hopping thing. I remember, I think it was with VG Cats. I think I wanted to have some kind of thing with VG Cats jumping through different indie games and meeting all these different characters through that way. I think that would have been really cool. And hey, maybe something like that could happen someday. Who the fuck knows? But yeah, I would love to do that, and I would love to do something, of course, with my own characters. But I feel like Tome is the first thing I've done that's really been like fully fleshed out in a way that would even remotely lend itself to that. I think, Tome was something that I thought if I had like all the time in the world to do like a million of, other episode ideas, I would have loved to have done like, oh, here's an episode where they meet a bunch of characters that are, based on the Parody Rangers, and whether or not it was actually them from the Parody Rangers cartoons or if it was just people that happen to be kind of like them. Because that's the thing too with Tome, if it's just like, if they're just characters that people are playing at a video game, they can appear as you know them from, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are those same characters. Like it could have just been like if I had done something with the Parody Rangers, which I did. I had them appear as a little cameo in the Gemini tournament, one of those episodes. But like an actual full episode of 5 characters that happen to have the same like voices and personalities and blah 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 as the actual Parody Rangers and where they came from and everything. That would have been fun. Same thing with like there was this one time with the Team 4-Star guys. But yeah, in some ways, I think it is kind of a cool like fantasy goal in that regard. You know, I mean, like Tome, like I was saying, and I didn't finish my thought, is that it's the first thing I've done that feels fully fleshed out in that kind of way that I could do something with. But even then, like, you know, it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. But you know, whatever comes next, I'm sure there might be some way for me to do something with it somehow. I have no idea. But yeah, I think someday if I were feasibly able to do that in a way that is logical and that works and that would be neat, you know, I would love to. The other thing too is the other kind of thing that kind of gets in the way of doing a proper sort of crossover in that vein is that, and I remember explaining this to Liz one time because she would often comment about how I use a lot of the same like. It feels like a lot of my characters from series to series are the same. What I kind of considered my characters to be sometimes are in that sort of Osamu Tezuka sort of way where like they're like a troupe of actors that appear in different scenarios. That doesn't mean that I don't still treat their universe like it, you know, it is real and like it, you know, there has to be a real sense of logic to it and everything. But what I mean is like say for instance between you know, Balancing Act and Tome, for instance. So like Chris Frost and Kerbifer share a lot of similarities, but in one universe, Kerbifer / Zeto is the, you know, anti-hero sort of, you know, butt monkey character, and then in Balancing Act, he's the socially awkward kind of character who's a little bit more like Alpha, actually. And then likewise, Alpha, who, you know, is the trope character based off of Mike Lucas, is the main, you know, messiah, saves the day protagonist of Tome. But then in Balancing Act, he's the, you know, the quick-witted, kind of more like the Kerbifer character, who's not an anti-hero, but he's like the more kind of like grumpy one with the sword or whatever, you know, stuff like that. Those are a couple examples, but there's more that are like that from thing to thing. And, you know, I think that has some value to it. I can also see why that's a little frustrating. And for me, it makes it difficult for me to, like, imagine having all those things together in one setting. But that's why I think that it might work better if it was, like, under some sort of, like, alternate universe where everything could all be together and it works and it makes sense or something like that. You know what I mean? But who knows? Again, you know, who knows what's going to happen with my stuff in the future, and maybe there might be some way to have all of it you know, be under one thing. So, you know, we'll certainly see how it goes. But again, yeah, it's a goal. It's a fantasy goal to aspire to once I continue to learn and do more. I think that would be great to do something like that down the line. I think that could be really interesting. But yeah, those are my thoughts. That I was able to say a lot more about this than I was expecting. I thought this was going to end up being a short one like that Gravity Falls Kirblog. But yeah, awesome. Well, in the comments below, please tell me, what is your favorite multiverse / crossover / you know, multi-thing character? You know, tell me some examples of, you know, comics, movies, video games, TV shows, anything, books, whatever, anything you feel like that all fall under that sort of umbrella. And as always, if you have ideas for future Kirblog topics, leave a comment about that too, or hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, whatever you feel like. And that'll do it. Thank you for watching / listening / enjoying, I hope, and I will see you all in the multiverse. Bye. 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 Bye.